It's been a while since I've recorded here on the showroom floor instead of my studio, which is also in the building, but today I want to show you 3 of my favorite skeleton dials that's available in my store, Carat Co, and bring you along with me as I talk about them. So the watches I'm looking at today is the Cartier Santos Skeleton, the Piaget Polo Skeleton, and the Zenith Defy Skyline Skeleton. I'll be reviewing how they wear on the wrist, how they differ from each other, and what each one does really well. And by the end of the video, I'll give out watch superlatives that best characterizes each watch. But let's first talk about the similarity of all 3 of these models. So they all have a skeleton dial, duh, but we'll go into the details and nuances of each one. They all have on-the-fly bracelet and strap changing abilities. This is a feature I welcome on so many new watches and huge advantage in wearing flexibility. And finally, all of these watches are stainless steel cases with time only. Let's first start with the Cartier Santos Skeleton. If you watch my other reviews on the Cartier Santos Medium, you'll know that I'm a huge fan of this watch and I still wear it day to day. And although it only comes in a large size for this skeleton case shape, it's undeniable that it is one of my favorite everyday luxury watches. The Cartier Santos case is so iconic because it's a square case with bezel screws, meant to resemble the screws on an aircraft. It's the first men's wristwatch and also the first pilot's watch. Although I don't know if I would want a pilot to rely on this skeleton dial while flying a plane. The case size is 40mm with a 9.08 thickness, which is very wearable on the wrist and pretty much easy for anyone who has a 7-inch wrist and above. Yes, the screws are unintentionally not aligned, and that is just a Cartier signature that even translates into their Cartier love rings and bracelets. The screw look goes into the bracelet, which also features Cartier's quick switch and easy link system. So not only can you change the strap without tools, but you can also size the bracelet on the fly, which is almost like having a on-the-fly micro adjustment, except that you just have to carry an extra link with you. Now, instead of the classic printed Art Deco dial that we're used to, Cartier flips the script and puts the hour markers hidden cleverly within the bridges of the watch, making it both useful and intentionally part of the movement design of the entire watch. Keep in mind that this Santos Skeleton movement is manual winding with no rotor on site, meaning you'd have to hand wind the crown every day to get the watch set, which can be a little bit of annoyance for some, but I think adding a rotor would have definitely added an additional 2 to 3mm to the thickness that Cartier was trying to avoid. But on the flip side, the movement has a 72-hour power reserve, which is 3 days, great for day-to-day wear. And the Cartier Santos has a 100-meter water resistance, so it's not afraid of being a swimmable watch. Now, there's many different versions of the Cartier Santos Skeleton. I mean, there is a steel version, there is a black ADLC version, so it's pretty easy to pick and choose which version you want, and you're not locked into specific choices. Now, if your wrist is like mine at 6.4 inches, then wearing this large case can be a little bit of a struggle, which then there is the new Cartier Santos Dumont Skeleton, which was launched this year in 2023. And while that was one of my favorite watches that launched this year, the Santos Dumont case is more elongated and elegant looking, so it's not the exact same thing as what we have here. And the Santos Dumont also has a reduced 3-bar water resistance and only comes on a leather strap, so you still have to think about whether those aspects will be important to you. But the Cartier Santos Dumont Skeleton is more like the medium size, and it does have a micro rotor, so it's automatic. So that's definitely an option if you wanted a skeleton dial but smaller from Cartier. Moving on, let's talk about the Piaget Polo Skeleton. This is one of my favorite versions of the Piaget Polo collection, aside from the chronograph and also the perpetual calendar. It's 42mm with a thin 6.5mm case, the thinnest out of all 3 of these watches. It has a clean 2-hander display, only hours and minutes, and the real beauty here is how Piaget makes the framework nicely, hand-finished, and visible. It should come as no surprise that Piaget is already known for their ultra-thin watches, such as in the Altiplano collection. And you can see that they kept the ultra-thin spirit here. The watch case is cushion-shaped, which wears pretty large and flat on my wrist, but thanks to the thin case, it wears comfortably. The bracelet is nice with an H-shaped links with both high polish and satin finish, but keep in mind there is no taper on the bracelet. Now, Piaget's dial starts with the minute track in the same blue as the movement with sharp triangular shaped hour markers, which can kind of blend into the dial, overall creating this beautiful mashup of high-level finishing. And the other option it comes in is a gray dial movement, but between the two, I would choose the blue version just because it's slightly easier to actually read the time. Oh yeah, did I mention that all 3 of these watches can actually tell the time? Now, my favorite aspect on the Piaget Polo Skeleton is the use of a micro rotor. Using a micro rotor helps keep the watch case thin because instead of stacking on top a large central rotor, you're basically putting the micro rotor parallel with the rest of the movement, effectively keeping it super thin. Most of Piaget's advantage here is in their aesthetic and beautiful finishing. Finally, let's talk about the Zenith Defy Skyline Skeleton, which is new to 2023. Now, Zenith introduced the Defy Skyline back in 2022, and one of the biggest changes from the Defy Classic to the Skyline was the introduction of the 1/10 of a second El Primero caliber 3620 SK, which they proudly put on display symmetrically at 6 o'clock. The case here is 41mm with a thickness of 11.6mm, which is the thickest of all three of these options, but in no way does it actually feel that thick on the wrist. The bezel has an octagonal shape, which is a callback to the early Defy models of the 1960s. It also has the most sharp case, as the Cartier and the Piaget had more softer edges in a cushion or square shape. And now the bracelet is nicely tapered and has sharp edges. Not sharp enough that you'd cut yourself while wearing it though. When looking at the time, you'll see that there's a blue 4-pointed star with nice depth in the dial due to having applied indices to separate the hours from the minute track. Out of all three of these watches, I also find the Zenith to be the most legible of the three. Piaget's framework would be the most similar, except without the use of tones such as black for the minutes, it can take a few extra seconds to find the minutes or the hours. Now, the 3620 SK movement is on full display through the sapphire crystal caseback with a large blue rotor. The watch has a power reserve of 60 hours, and Zenith's watch also differs by having super luminova on the hands and indices, a screw-down crown to ensure its 100-meter water resistance, and the only strap changing method that also includes a very soft rubber strap with folding buckle. So to sum it up, Zenith would win the functional and practical award here. It's a skeleton dial with lume, screw-down crown, rubber strap option, 100-meter water resistance, the best of every day, and something I wouldn't be afraid to wear for most regular day-to-day activities. It has the best strap changing system in my opinion out of these three because it's very easy to use, and the inclusion of the rubber strap makes it super comfortable at $11,000. Now, the Piaget Polo Skeleton is definitely the prettiest out of these three options, but at the same time feels the most delicate. Sometimes having the thinnest watch is not always a good thing. I mean, a thinner watch can give off the appearance of low durability, and when you couple in the fact that it only has 3-bar water resistance, it definitely feels something less of an everyday watch and something that you would buy if you really appreciate high watchmaking. Hey, nothing wrong with that, it's just for a different kind of collector. And most of the beauty in this watch is in the movement construction. But the bracelet and case feels the least technical out of all three of these with a more soft and rounded construction. So the Piaget Polo Skeleton to me is going to be the prettiest out of all three options. And it's also the most expensive at $32,400. It does come in two different dial variations, either in blue or gray. Personally, I would choose the blue over the gray because it has a slightly better legibility than the gray dial version. And finally, the Cartier Santos sits closer to the Piaget than the Zenith here in terms of this practical versus pretty scale, but it's definitely more robust than the Piaget. People still won't be able to escape scratching up that polished bezel unless they go for the ADLC versions, but if I had to give a superlative to the Cartier Santos Skeleton, it would be the word original. The Santos has the most iconic design to me out of these three. It has the most interesting dial design because instead of raised indices, Cartier used the bridges of the movement to spell out the Roman numeral for the hours. In terms of price, it does sit between the Piaget and the Zenith, but it is still in the $30,000 range. So out of those three options, which one was your favorite? And if you're interested in any of these, my store Carat Co is an authorized retailer for 25+ luxury watch brands located in Flushing, Queens, New York. So you can always reach out to us with any of your questions or if you want to purchase them. Oh yeah, if there's other skeleton watches you think I should have mentioned, definitely drop it in the comments below. If you want a little bit more of a deep dive to each of these watches, I have a playlist here that goes into the Cartier Santos collection, the Piaget Polo Skeleton, and also the Zenith Defy Skyline. Anyways, it's been a minute. Thanks so much for watching this, and I'll see you next time. Bye.